Welcome back, everyone. I'm Carrington-Russell, Australian award-winning author of contemporary romance and kick-butt heroines and dark fantasy worlds. And I have a very special guest for you today. We are talking all things monsters, fantasy, and of course, romance, or what I also like to call as smut. Known for books such as the Duskwalker Bride series and Witchbound series, we are talking to the one and only Opal Reyne. How are you today?
I'm good. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm really good. So this is going to be fun, and a little bit awkward almost because you and I are actually friends. So we're going to try and keep this PG related. And although I already know a bit about your journey, I would love to go back to the start again with you and find out where writing started and why you started writing and how you got to where you are today.
So I started writing when I was young, but I very much lacked the discipline and just the ability to just sit down at my computer and work. It was just too much. I started writing my first book at 19, my second book at 23, which was just a really hard time in my life. And then 26 rolled around and I was like, I'm going to give it a go. So I did. And I ended up publishing three books that are now taken down just because they required a lot of editorial reviews and a lot of just where I am now was a different place than when I first started. So I was like, best move for me is to take them down. But they were the beginning of my journey and I had a lot of fun writing them and I would like to go back to them if I can in the future. And then after that, I wrote a pirate duology. Honestly, because of a TikTok that I saw when the sea shanties were going around on TikTok, it just inspired me to want to write a pirate story. So I did. I wrote my duology. I actually wrote, I've written three books of the Witchbound series already, and I wrote them before I started writing the Dustwalker Brides. But I just published them later because I liked having a backlog of books. Um, but I started writing the Dustwalker Brides, funnily because of multiple reasons. One of them being I'm a massive anime lover, and I really loved Elias from the Ancient Magus's Bride. But I also really liked Demon Slayer. So I tried to do a bit, I took, not took, but I touched on and was inspired by different parts of those stories. And I kind of blended them together with my own things. So going more cottage core, less magic for the girl and all magic for the guy. And then all the demons, of course, and just how they can be pretty, but like they're mostly just nightmarish fuel, rather than, your tail twirling demons. um, and I wanted to write something that was like dark. It wasn't dark romance. My books aren't dark romance. They have dark themes though. But I wanted to have like a sort of horror aspect to things because it's just the kind of person I am. And so yeah, I started writing it and haven't looked back since. The Dustwalker Brides has been a very special place to me in my author career. So
Yeah. And we will start talking about that series too, because that series seriously put you on the map. There was exponential growth in every way from that series. But I also want to quickly touch on as well, as you said, it's definitely not dark romance. And we've had a previous conversation that I actually found was super helpful for me in many ways as well. So I'd love if you could touch on that again. The difference between what dark romance is when somebody perhaps looks at your book cover, for example, a lot might assume that it is dark romance, but then you had quickly educated me what the difference was within those genres. Are you able to briefly touch on that now as well, if that's okay?
absolutely. For me, dark romance is where the romance itself is dark. So there's a lot of darkness coming from the main male character or the female main character towards each other. So you've got knife play, blood play, stuff like that that's very dark towards each other. Whereas romance with darker themes is more that the external is happening. So the monster himself may be human eating, but he does not want to hurt her. That's a part of the difference. Now, of course, there are books that have those aspects that are in the romance and they're exploring kinks, but they're still not dark. There's always consent. There's always making sure that there's not actual truthful harm to the characters. Whereas dark romance will go far and beyond that. They will explore those kinds of kinks, like I said, like knife play, where she may not be consenting to that, or it's done in a really possessive way that she's unsure about. There's a lack of that consent and a lack of care in the terms of how the female or main character is being treated. Still fantastic books, and I absolutely adore dark romance, so that is nothing negative on that, but it's just a difference between having darker themes in the same way that fantasy romance and romance fantasy is very different. Fantasy romance is romance with fantasy. Romance with fantasy is a fantasy story with romance.
Yeah. And I think it's really important too, because I think it's really difficult currently for a lot of authors, or especially newer authors, to understand what to categorize or what tropes or what niches they have, because there are so many different variants now. So, what did you find helped you better understand that at the start? Was it research you were doing on particular books, or you found a golden list somewhere? How did you differentiate them and make it easier for yourself as to know where to put your books?
For me, it was really easy because monster romance, my genre is just all as it is now. Whereas when you've got a book that touches on so many different levels, so you've got books that have fantasy, paranormal, dystopian, but then they also go back in time. And those books are really hard to categorize, and you kind of have to go with the main ones. But if your book is a romance, that romance must sit at the end, because then that tells the reader that that's the main point. So like for instance, my books are a form of dystopian. They're an apocalyptic world. The world has been stopped in the 1700s because demons came along and technology just couldn't advance. But we're actually at 2000 in the 2000s, 2022 within the series, and so it's a form of dystopian. But I would not categorize it as that. I would categorize it as its main point, which is paranormal or fantasy, monster romance.
I do want to touch on briefly as well, as you said, Magnus Bride, Demon Slayer, love those animes. Outing myself as a total nerd here, but would you ever consider doing like a manga or comic version of your books?
That is something I very much want to do. However, it is a very, very, very expensive journey. Just to have just one book with half the size of my content of my books, you're looking at about 60,000.
Nice.
Because every page is drawn. So like you don't just have one character, you have multiple characters moving on multiple panels, and it just one page itself can be quite expensive, just in the terms of the art itself. And yeah, you could go cheaper, but then you're not giving the readers the detail that you designed in your books. Especially for me, the reason why my books are so big is because I have a lot of detail and I don't want to skim over those. So it's a very expensive endeavor. Something I have looked into, but it's more likely something that I will, because I'll end up starting a Kickstarter for it, just because it has a very little return for something that's an output, and it's more just for the readers, because the artist is who gets paid.
One thing that I love speaking with you about is you are very business minded. And I think not necessarily everyone that steps into this realizes immediately that it is a business. And so I am curious, I want to know where you have that background from, or was it something that you discovered along the way and realized, okay, I need to study this or I need to do this? Where did that come from?
So I've owned my own business in the past. That went flip side, and I was audited by the ATO, which is the Australian Tax Office. I have been a supervisor, a team leader, and I've worked with coordinating shifts. I have been in management roles before, and I have done 80% of a dual diploma of business and management. I didn't need to finish it in order to do the role that I was doing. But you already went deeply into marketing and you understood that the benefits of different sales tactics. I had a little bit of that knowledge with me, but in saying that, being an author is different. It's different in the terms of you are your own boss and everything is on you, and sometimes things are out of your control. So Amazon can take your account like that. You know what I mean? And that's not your fault. You could have done every step that's correct, and they just go no. And then you got pirating to take into consideration and stuff like that, and that can be very overwhelming. And there's so much to learn, and I'm still learning. Every day I learn something new. Sometimes I'll make a mistake, but it's learning from those mistakes, and it's making sure that everything that you do has a positive action, and trying as hard as you can to take emotion away from it, as much as you want to be emotional, because writing is such an emotional thing. You have to take your emotions away from it, because who you are as a brand and who you are as a person are two different things. We all laugh at certain CEOs on Twitter or X or what it's called now, and they tweet things, and then they have they just get absolute backlash from it because they have started mixing their business and themselves together. And it's the same thing with being an author. We have to take those precautionary steps, and we have to research in what we're doing, and we have to act a certain way even if our heart tells us not to.
Yeah. Let's talk about then exponential growth, because when you released Sold to Keep, that was when the snowball effect really started happening for your career. I'd like to know sort of what place, what mindset you were at when you released that, whether you think that obviously this book in itself is a trailblazer. It is very different to what had been released at the time as well, which was incredible. So I'd love to know how you then navigated and managed that new expectation, that new boom, that new sets of eyes. How did you go with that?
I was scared. I'll be quite frank with you. I was very scared. It was very much an overnight sort of thing for me. I went from being a nobody author to much larger, especially within my genre, within the span of a month to 2 months. And I had to learn being an absolute nobody in my career to being somebody in my career, and not allowing who I am to impact that. Like I got a lot of negative reviews, and at first I immediately wanted to fight with those people because how dare you have a negative thought on my thing. But then I realized along the way that not every book is for every reader, not every author is for every reader, and that's perfectly okay, because there are people who are for me, and it's learning to that step was one of the first ones I had to take. And looking at reviews was one of the biggest mistakes I made, because it stopped me from writing, and it put the additional pressure I was already under harder. I started getting really negative about myself. I started considering if I wanted to write, even though my book was doing really well. It was a very scary process, going from zero to essentially at the speed of light. And it was, yeah, very scary, and navigating it with a lack of knowledge. And I did not have a lot of friends within the industry as well, just because I've always been a bit shyer. And so I didn't want to reach out to my favorite authors, be like, hi, I loved your book. Because I felt like I was going to be like some weirdo in their DMs. But as someone who is now an author and receives that, we absolutely adore it. So now I try and go out of my way to do it. But it's learning that. And it was, yeah, coming from having no knowledge, no idea what I was doing, and just having that sort of business background that I had to lean on, which had nothing to do with being an author, just enough about being a business owner. That was all I had to lean on. And yeah, it was very scary, and it took a lot. Like I said before, I'm still learning every minute of the day. And yeah, it is a lot. But now that I have a really good group of authors that I like talking to, and we really bounce off each other. And sometimes it's finding those people who will be there for you when things are tough, who can help you and settle you. And like I said, it's a very emotional business, even though we're not allowed to react emotionally. And so it's good to have that knowledge now, and it's good to have those people I can connect with, and it's good to be able to sit there and wonder what my next step is in a more logical way, rather than I didn't even have a website. Like, I didn't have a website. I had nothing. I didn't have a logo. Like, I had nothing. It was just me all by myself, just going, yay, look, read my book. So yeah, there's a lot to take into consideration.
Yeah. One thing that I loved as well is when we had first spoken about this, you'd actually said that had a Soul to Keep not done well, you were considering not writing anymore because of how much of a toll it can take, especially when you're still working full time, when you're doing that hustle. So I always find this really interesting because, and I always like to make a point of it too, because you never know which book is going to be the next book for you. You don't know what's around the corner. So I love the aspect of never giving up as well. So I really wanted to just highlight that right now. So I am curious, and what were some of the conversations you had to have with yourself? Because obviously, within that span of 1 to 2 months, you see sales spike, which is absolutely incredible, but you get all that noise as well. You're getting people messaging you, you're getting all of these opportunities that you may have not necessarily had before, and you don't know which is the right one to go. So, would you say that a lot of your source was from finding that author tribe then and there, or did it still take some time to find them and you just kind of had to really navigate it yourself and just remind yourself that this is what you wanted to do, or was there something else there for you?
I didn't get a nice group of authors to really sit with for a while. I had one or two that I love and adore and gave me so much advice. But in the terms of like having a group that you can just go and be comfortable with, and then having all the other people who are not part of that, for instance, you and I have a bunch of other authors that I connect with on a personal level just by ourselves. I did not develop a lot of them until about what are we now? About 9 months. And so during the biggest arc of my boom, when things were still quite scary, I was still by myself. I was paddling deep water, trying not to drown. And it was just by pure luck that I started having conversations and I started coming out of my shell and I started trying to network, regardless of the fact that I can be a bit reserved and a bit antisocial, because I needed to get to know people and I wanted to. But the main thing with me though is I want to meet genuine people. And so trying to have that genuine conversation over the internet is actually really difficult. So it can take some time to build that trust and that level of getting to know someone. And there are still quite a few authors that I have my hand out to right now that are a bit wary about getting to know me. And that's fine. But it was just for me, I had that same thing. I had authors who had their hand out who were happy to get to know me, or I had to heavily reach out to them just because I love their books, I love their writing, I like the way that their presence on social media. Their presence on social media is a big one as well. And I like to know that their morals align with my own. For instance, being anti-AI, paying for human artists, being positive towards the LGBTQIA plus community, just stuff like that. I want people to be similar to who I am but themselves all at the same time, and getting to have those relationships can take a really long time. And even now when you grow and you're at the size that I am, it's still awkward having that conversation with someone because you want to get to know them, but it's really hard to know if you're going to be the right fit for each other over the internet.
What I love too is when I first met you, it was at Rare Melbourne 2023. I had to think about what year we were in then because this is going so quickly. But it was your first signing, and you were, mind my language, shit and bricks. And but it was really refreshing as well to watch in the sense that had that been your first signing a year ago, it might have been a little bit easier for you to navigate initially because you could have built into it, but because you had such a huge fan base already and you had so many readers come, you didn't really know what to expect. And it's difficult at book signings and events, I think, too, to sort of know immediately how you should display it, what you should be displaying, what prices do you do, how many books do you take. It's very overwhelming. So in that time, you've now had two signings, I think. What are some of your top tips or things that you've learnt for newer authors who might be going to a signing? What advice would you offer them?
One of my favorite things, I said it to readers, but I also say it to authors, is that the person in front of you is more scared of you than you are of them. So like for authors, like it was something that I said to my readers because like I had quite a few people who were quite nervous. I had shakers, I had criers. It was a very different experience. And in order to try and calm their nerves, I just went, we're more afraid of you than you are of us. But it's also the same way, like readers get really nervous about meeting an author. And so that same thing, the author is more afraid of you than you are of them. You know what I mean? So it's everyone, emotions are running high, people are anxious, and let's be real, a lot of book readers are introverts, and so it's just taking a bunch of introverts and putting them in a mass crowd. so it has its fun, and kind of understanding the human intricacies of what that's like. It was very eye-opening. Um, the events weren't what I expected. Neither one were. Babe was very different. It was a lot of fun because it was a massive dress up, and I had fun, and like I stacked it in the middle of the event, just hands and knees, just on my face almost. But yeah, I stacked it. But like I still think about it, but I had a giggle because I just stood up and I went, whoops, and I just got back up to it, you know. Whereas a lot of people start to linger on those thoughts, and it's just you have to forget them or think of them in a positive light, because you're going to make mistakes. You're going to say something to someone and just be like, I made a mistake. But you're a human, and at the moment your fight or flight instincts have kicked in because of your anxiety. I think that's the best thing, is just to remember them fondly, and to know that it may seem really anxiety inducing, but you'll be surprised about the number of authors that will come up and just greet you. It doesn't matter who you are. Like I remember for Babe, I tried to go to in my 2 aisles that I was the closest to, I tried to say hello to everyone, just because why not? You know what I mean? I don't know them. I don't know their book. I want to get to know them. You know, a few of the books I bought, you know, so like it's a good way to get to know people, and it feels far more genuine than online, and you'll have a more significant, stronger bond. Like look at you and I, for instance. We met through Rare, and we have become like two peas in a pod.
Yeah.
And that probably wouldn't have happened online. That genuine that we had with each other really benefited that. So I definitely think that going to it is an anxiety inducing, but have fun with it.
100%. And I think you're completely correct in that authors love being there for other authors as well. And I think honestly, like besides readers, of course, that is one of my favorite times. I mean, you've seen me at signings. I'm next level on candy. But I
Like
absolutely
a full pink suit.
yeah, true actually. My Barbie power suit, loved it. But it's such an incredible way because these, you know, for anyone who hasn't yet started signing or they're just getting into it, these are your people. Like, you know, everyone wants to meet everyone. It's like when you're all in the way that I always say it is, it's like being all in the same sandbox. All your friends are finally at the same playground, and you can kind of like, and it's super exciting in that way too. So if you are nervous, you know, definitely talk to the person next to you. Go up to people, check out people's books. It always starts a conversation. So I think that's really, really good advice. And you stacking it in the middle of Babe does not surprise me at all. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, I'm sure someone else has tripped over an event, and just like for the rest of their life, it's like that when they're just drifting off to sleep, and it's like that last anxious thought of the night, just oh God, I stacked it that one time. I've done it. And I still giggle about it.
You got it over and done with now, hopefully, knock on wood.
I'll probably do it again. I'm insanely clumsy.
I do want to touch on as well, before you mention pirating. So I want to go over this a little bit with you because you have unfortunately been victim to this quite a few times. So, what are some of the things that you have in place to try and spot out where it might have been pirated, or what do you do to then get it removed as well?
So pirating it's a difficult subject, simply because you've got the people who I consider to have an unethical moral sense about it. But battling it is such a hard endeavor as an author. And I have decided to step back from it, and I hire a company called Pyredo. There is another one, starts with a name, I can't remember it. But I heard that they're just as good as well. And they have my books, they have my name, and they do a cross reference across Google and just search engines to try and find pirating books. However, that is not always effective, and there's multiple reasons for it, being that, for instance, I had a book uploaded onto Apple Books, and they changed the name of the title, and so therefore you couldn't find the name, but people knew that they had enough of the keywords to be able to find my book there. You know, so it would have like one of them was Trust the Dustwalker, and so people write Dustwalker, my book shows up, but that doesn't necessarily, you know what I mean? So it doesn't always work. But most of the time it does, and it is a lot easier not to have to think about it. because it is mentally and emotionally draining. And the fact that Amazon being Kindle Unlimited means that you could have your account banned simply because someone else is pirating your book and profiting off it is widely unfair, especially since they're the reason why their lack of safety precautions is the reason why our book was pirated in the first place. So that you have this big corporation that's willing to absolutely squash your career, and then you've got people who don't care and just keep taking advantage of that. And then the final issue that I've been faced with is there are certain countries that DCMAs don't work. So you can't get them taken down no matter how much you try, no matter how much Pyredo tries, no matter how much you legally try to get involved. Their copyright laws for that country just don't match the rest of the world. And so that book continues to be pirated on that website that is the IPB of that country, and it becomes insanely difficult to take down. You have to get Google and Google itself to squash the search bar for it. But people are still sharing it in groups and Messenger and stuff like that. So it just keeps growing.
Yeah. I'm sorry that you've experienced that, because there's nothing worse. And it definitely for a moment makes you feel helpless as well, because you know how much you've worked on this, and to have it so quickly taken away, especially to be repurposed and for them to receive money on your hard work, is quite frustrating as well.
The biggest thing with pirating is everyone says, but the person who uploaded it is getting it for free. But one thing people aren't taking into consideration is the person who owns that website or the people who upload it are getting paid via ads. So it's not free. Someone is still benefiting. It's just you're getting it for free, or someone's getting it for free, which is just helping the market to continue.
Let's delve into the world of the Duskwalker Bride series. We have a new release coming out. So, for those who've not yet read the series, I know we briefly discussed it. So, yeah, tell us about the new one. What do we need to know?
This book, I remember in the end of book 4, I put an apology out in my end of author note because it's going to be quite a heart-wrenching read in some ways, straight off from the bat. It's straight off. A lot of my other books, they have a tendency to be like, oh, there's a little bit of, stuff's happening because we're going to get the forced proximity to happen. And then they're stuck together, and then all this sort of stuff happens. And then we've got this climax and stuff starts happening. In this book, it's a bit different. We start with quite very action-packed beginning, and then we start slowing, and then we have a very action-packed ending like I usually have. But I also put a note at the end of my 4th book that I have a set of twins, and I know a lot of people really want me to have an MFM, but I can't do that. They're blood related. I can't match that in my head. And the other issue is that they can't share a soul. They can't bond together with her. One would be left out of the bond. And they're also very, very possessive creatures. So that means that the 5th book means that one of the twins is on his own. And the reasons for that are going to be hard for a lot of readers to take in. But I promise the book has a lot of spice and a lot of humor in it. I like trying to have a blend of those sorts of things. So I do torment my characters, and I guess I torment my readers a little, but I try to make them giggle. I try to make them everything spicy, and I try to have a story that feels very wholesome and winsome at the same time, despite them being scary monsters that eat people. But yeah, the next book will be, it's a big read. I already am aware that it's quite a long book. It's the same size as a Salter Guide, and that is the longest book of the series. And yeah, it has a list of triggers. So I do suggest that people read those trigger warnings if they have them. However, and unfortunately, this is not a skippable book in the series. Yeah, and in order to read the next book, you have to read this book. They go hand in hand because they're so. That's what makes this book really hard, because like I said, it's not a skippable book in the series, and I plan to write that in my trigger warning, just so people understand what will be happening. But yeah, so a lot of people who do have those triggers are going to find some of it very hard to get through. There's going to be a lot of tears. My editor said I owe her a Kleenex tax for tissues. But I always, all my books have a happily ever after, and all my books are designed to end with a positive note, regardless of what's happened.
I love that you put the disclaimer. You can't skip this book. It has to be read. You know, all your readers have read all the series all the way through anyway. I'm just like, they're gonna love it.
Well, not actually. So I know that in A Soul to Heal, it has two triggers in it that people have said that they've skipped the book and gone on to A Soul to Touch. And then mainly A Soul to Heal is the one that's happened with. Like for instance, I've got the pregnancy trope in it, which people don't like, or they just can't read, whatever reasons being. And so that, for a lot of people, was a skippable book in the series. Whereas the list of triggers that I have in this book will be probably longer than all the others.
Yeah. So then, what advice do you have for authors who are wanting to delve into the monster, the paranormal, the fantasy, the grittier stuff, I want to say? What is your advice in writing a fantastic book within that genre?
The answer to that is subjective, because what works for me may not work for another person. I've had a lot of readers say that I write in third person, but sometimes it feels like first person, and that the way that I write is different. And I love detail, but I also really enjoy having all those emotional responses and all that kind of stuff, which has that first person feeling, whereas third person can be quite detached. I try to have both. And for me, that's what works. I have a really long book that follows a very slow story arc. It's a slow burn with medium burn spice, if that makes sense. Like the romance is slow, but the spice is like, let's go. Just write. People will either love it or they won't. And you'll be surprised on what book will do really well. Like Kaya said earlier, with A Soul to Keep, I very much was considering not writing anymore after the book. I wasn't doing well. Financially, I couldn't afford to just live, let alone try and publish. So it just wasn't looking to be something I could do anymore. And then all of a sudden it went boom. And I was really lucky in the terms that I hit a really niche monster within my genre. I don't know of any that were published before me that had that as a permanent monster that wasn't an erotica. Because erotica has done almost everything, let's be real. But in the terms of an actual paranormal romance with a plot and a storyline, I was the first one I knew that did skull-headed monsters. So it was a very unique thing that I tapped into. Sometimes being that unique will do really well for you. Sometimes it won't. Following someone else's footsteps may grow you. There are many authors who have been inspired by another person's book and went, yes, and write something very similar, but the twist on that they do on it is so different and so unique to them that that's what makes it good. There's no rhyme or reason for it, And how I started, like I said, how I started writing the Dustwalker Brides was because I was heavily inspired by anime. But funny enough, I read a book by an author who had a spider as their main character, and I am an arachnophobic. I cannot stand spiders. I will yeet myself out of my house before I let the spider come near me. You know what I mean? Like, I'm terrified of spiders, and yet I adored the book. And I thought, if they can make me fall in love with a spider, alien, monster man, I can do it with a skullhead. And you can do that with yours, whether it be a slime monster, whether it be a bird monster, you know what I mean? It's just finding what really grips you and then going with it.
Yeah. So what does your writing process look like then? Are you a night, like what does your day look like? Do you have X amount of hours for marketing and X amount for writing? Are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? Are we lighting candles? What are we doing?
So I'm insane when it comes to writing. So I don't have a normal work schedule. I will get up and I will write whenever is convenient for me. And if that is 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I will be up 16 hours from that. So I could be up from 9 a.m. in the morning still writing, whereas everyone has gone to bed, waking up, and then, they're looking at me like, why are you awake? And I'm like, because this book won't leave me alone. And that can shift. Sometimes I'll wake up at 6 a.m., which is insanely rare, but it does happen. Very unlikely, but it does happen. And so my sleeping pattern when I write is thrown off. I will go to bed at 2 p.m. I'll go to bed at 6 p.m. I'll go to bed at 9 a.m. and I will sleep, but then I'll be at my computer between 12 to 16 hours a day. And I just write. When the book is in my head, I have to write it. Going out and going on adventures sometimes helps, but I find that I just have to knuckle down with my book, even when I have writer's block. So for me, I'm the kind of person that believes that 100 words was better than no words. And 100 terrible words is still better than no words, because I can go back and edit those words. You can edit a badly written manuscript. You can't edit a blank page. That's how I see it. And so I push forward, and my first draft of my book makes very little sense. I have words that don't belong. I add the word that I think makes sense or has the same starting letter, and then when I'm doing my first read through, because I edit my books multiple times, I realize that that's completely the wrong word. So my first draft is quite messy, but I get the points down. And I'm lucky that the terms of plot, I'm pretty clean. But there'll be the occasional like little loophole that I've missed, wherein like the character will have a bob for like the first few chapters, and suddenly it'll be really long, and I've just gone, excuse me. But we don't talk about the hair very often, so it kind of changes and shifts. So that's the things that I pick up on my first edit. Now, in the terms of being a plotter, panzer, or planzer, I'm probably a planzer. So I mean panzer, which means that it's all in my head and I just write. I just write as it goes, and it just comes to me as I write. But in saying that, I've already thought up a lot of the story in my head. It's just I haven't written it down. I haven't actually gone, A plus B plus C will eventually get to Z. It's in my head, and I'm like, this is the vibe I want. This is the kind of scene how I want it to go, and then I'll write it. And sometimes things will go off their own tangent. Sometimes my characters want to do other things. And I have to then decide whether or not that fits in the story. And that means when I'm going through my editing process, there can be a numerous amount of removing sections, because the characters can't be doing that, or I'll be reworking them to making more sense for the characters. So, yeah.
Then talking about scenes, credit is due when it comes to your book covers. They're so beautiful. They're so on brand, so on point. You know that they're consistent in the series. And your fan art is just as lovely. So I was curious as to what advice you have for fellow authors when it comes to working with cover artists and graphic designers. When it comes to executing those, do you give them a rough theme of what it is, or are you very specific in the detail that you want? How do you work with your artists?
So for me, I'm really lucky that once I had a Soul to Keep made, which was the starting book, I could then go to that same artist and just be like, very similar. This is what we need. This is what we don't need. Different skull, different horn variations, different eye color. So I had the staple, which was Orpheus. But following on from that, it's always good to have that cover reference for me to give to artists that I'm commissioning, because it helps with a visual reference. And then I try to give them a very drop down list of what I need. So like with my monsters, I'll go skull, write what kind of skull, horn type, write what kind of horn type, bones, how many bones they have, what they have, what kind of fur they have, if they're scales, tails, wings, etc. And so I give them a very really quick and easy to see. It needs to be clear to the eye. The artist doesn't want a massive block of text, because they've then got to separate it so that they can do it. Whereas if they've got something that goes, eyes blue, body shape thin, or chubby or strong, or you know what I mean. So it's easier for them. You have to think about what's easier for the eye for the artist. And quite a few times in a commission drop down that they have, like all their information, there'll be like no blocks of text. Don't tell me the story of the character. They just want to know the details and the positions. You can find references for like positions on Pinterest, on Google, on Twitter, and you absolutely do not want the artist to trace, but you can go, this is the vibe I want. I want, his hand cupping here and her hand on his hip, on her hip, which is a very generic stance. But you need, sometimes that visual reference really helps them to make that feel more alive when they're trying to figure out your commission. When it comes to hiring an artist, though, it can be a bit of an endeavor going through it, especially now with AI happening. So AI cannot be copyrighted at the moment in the States, which good, because it's a machine that made it. It's not made by a human, and that same image can still be reproduced by multiple other people. They just have to put the exact same prompts in and they'll get the same image. So it's very different. So copyright and licensing and commercial licensing are all things that you have to take into consideration when you are getting art, and you need to know what you intend to utilize it for. So if you want to use it for commercial licensing, whether that's to have it on a book cover, if you want to promote with it, if you want to sell prints of it, have it on merch, you have to have a license to do that. Even though it's your characters, the artist still owns that art unless they give you the full licensing, which means they can't do anything with it. And you have to sit and think about what your budget is and where you want to be. So I purchase very little of the licensing of the artwork. I allow the art, and this is a personal choice for me, I allow the artist to do what they want with their art. They do it for me, and their exposure of them sharing it and selling it helps me, vice versa. I like to work very hand in hand with my artist and make sure that they are benefiting just as much as I am. And I really like that my reader groups will push to them and grow them and make them bigger, and that helps the artist then, and it gets them developing their skills in the same way that every time I write a book, I'm developing my skills, and then the art just gets better, and then the work you're getting is just better, and it's benefit for everyone around. But you do have to take in consideration of budgeting and what that would be like for you, because owning a commission license, the commission commercial licensing means that you're paying an additional fund on top of that art. So you may be expecting something, but if you want to use it to benefit you, you have to expect to pay for it. It's how branding works. It's how those artists make their money, and that's fair,
I'm ready for the beast here now. I hope you're ready for it too. All I can think about is, are you ready for this B1? I think I am too. And if nobody knows what that is a reference to Banana in Pajamas. And I don't know if that is an Australian show or if that was worldwide, but my condolences. I'm showing my age. So I don't know why I went with that. Let's talk about marketing. It's such a tricky beast. What are your top 3 tips for authors that you have found have worked for you?
Marketing, sales, and everything regarding your brand is subjective and it's personal. For me, it's understanding how to get my foot in the door. So the first thing I did with a Soul to Keep, we were just discussing this a while ago, but the first thing I did with a Soul to Keep is that I undercut the market in order to get myself the most readerships, because my readers is where it is, but I was very much undercutting myself. And I did that on purpose because when I was nobody, nobody wanted to read my book. And so I needed to gain that exposure. And the first step is reach. And then once that reach started rolling over, I could then start moving over into the sales that reflect what everyone else is writing. And it's called playing the long game, not the short game. The short game is having it the same as everyone else and hoping that readers will pick it up and take that trust in you that you haven't developed with them yet. It's like those books that sell at 99 cents on Kindle. They have so many readers, and they grow their reader fans, and then they go, I'm okay now, and I can start moving on to the next step that is normal for any business to take, which is, okay, this was my starting price, this will be my medium price, and this is my next price, and kind of finding where you sit. Now, for me personally, I judge the price of my books on the how many pages and how many words it has. And the reason why I do this is because there's a whole process that goes into you double the process basically from a 90,000 word book to a 180,000 word book, which is where a lot of my books sit. And so I have to pay additionally for just Amazon sending the book to readers. There's an additional fee because that fee is then bigger because it's calculated over the price of the file. Whether it's 2 megabytes, 5 megabytes, or 8 megabytes. And so there's still a fee that goes with that. And so my royalties, if I had my bigger books being the same price as my smaller books, would drop. And that's not fair. And then the other one is that it took me more to edit it. It took me a long time to write it, which is relative in terms of how everyone writes, because everyone has different writing times. But for me, they take longer to write. And I work 16 hours a day, and it can be a lot and strenuous work. So that was one of the first things, was understanding how sales works. And one of the things that I know is that you have to understand where you're selling and the country you're selling in. And one of the first steps I had to take as an author was to research pricing, the average pricing in every country, because I'm from Australia and my biggest market I always knew was going to be in the States. And so I had to research what was normal there. Otherwise, if I had done the conversion from Australian to the American, it was actually way more expensive for Americans when I was a smaller author. It was actually from the encouragement of another author that I bring up the prices of my books for the content that I had. And they're a bigger author than me. So, I was like, okay, well, I'll take your advice. But it's understanding that. So it's mapping your projection and understanding that being an author is a long game. It's not a short game. It's not making money in the span of a night. I know that sounds almost hypocritical coming from someone who did have a very massive jump, but I started being an author 3 years before, 2.5 years before my author career jumped up. And I did that process. I had my books all small. When I first started being an author, my books were $3.99, and they were big books. They were 165,000 words, but I still knew that people wouldn't want to take a chance on me if I was the same price. And so I wanted to get more readers, because my author career is not going to stop next year. I'm not making all this money really quickly to stop publishing and then retire. It's a long game, and I would rather have a slower amount of readers. And so I bring down the prices manually through other countries. And yes, I get a lower royalty, but it's the average of those countries. And with the US, I sit on a high average. I know that there are authors who have their kin ebooks sitting at $9, in Australia $15, and that is for me too high. Ebooks should be affordable, but it is taking into considerations of different things. But that may not work for someone else, and that's why I'm saying it's very subjective, and how people want to place things up on Amazon is completely their own choice, and that's how they've decided to do their branding. And that's what makes being an author and running your own business to it so unique and so individual. And that step is different for everyone. So marketing isn't going to sales in general is different for everyone, and it's completely subjective. Whereas for me, marketing is changing. I had very little marketing in the beginning. I tried to get some beta readers and some just reviewers from Instagram, which makes me giggle now, because quite a few of the people that I contacted to read my books when I wasn't popular ended up messaging me when my Assault to Keep started doing really well. And I giggled at a few of them, because someone was like, you just went to my request section. I'm like, it's fine, I don't mind. But that's the first step that I started doing. And those people got to see that first step, which is kind of funny. But for me, I have never really had a straight team. I have had a bunch of readers who have been with me for the beginning. And one of them is the admin of a reader group who we became friends because she gushed so hard over my book, she wouldn't leave me alone. But now we're the best of friends. And it was amazing. And I loved it. I loved having that reader who finally wanted to gush at me. And I adored every minute of it. I was like, oh no, you can't leave me. I need you. I need that positivity to keep moving forward. And she really helped. She allowed me to connect with other authors who knew how to market when I knew nothing. And she was very much a big step for me that I wasn't doing it on my own. I still had to learn a whole bunch on my own, but she was the first step in allowing me to take that step. And she then, like I said, connected me to authors who are like, you need to contact people on Insta, you need to push on Book Talk, you need to really get yourself out there. You can't just expect one reader to make you boom. And that's absolutely true. And that's why I believe that even though we hate talking about being paid in exposure, as an author, exposure is literally your best friend, because that's what will push you. That's what will get you places. You can do it any way that you want, but sometimes smart business is undercutting yourself to get the max amount of exposure so that your next book gets the most amount of exposure, and then you grow. That exposure grows, because that's how any form of artistry, the only way marketing is based off exposure, whether that exposure is having multiple TikToks of your own or multiple other people, or having ads constantly running at people, on Facebook or Instagram or on the side of a bus. It's still exposure. That's what you're looking for. That ad may not have paid for and may not gain any readers, but you still got that exposure. That was a potential. And I know it's such a shitty conversation to have about, because nobody wants to be paid in exposure. It feels really bad when we talk about it that way, but exposure is how you get known. Exposure is where you go forward, and it should not be subsidized for income, but it should go with your income. It should go with every sale tactic that you make. Exposure should be your main goal. How many people can I reach?
I'm curious then, what has been your greatest challenge and your greatest accomplishment so far in your writing career?
My greatest accomplishment. We'll start with that one. No, we won't start with that one because I can't think of it. My greatest challenge, honestly, you would think it'd be marketing, you think it'd be making friends, you think it'd be writing the book. It's the audiobook. I hate it so much. I hate the process of an audiobook. I've just uploaded my first audiobook. It's been approved, but now it can take 2 to 4 weeks for wide, and then almost 2 months on Audible for it to go live. But the process of start to finish, especially of a spicy novel, of hearing someone read your spice back to you. I have auditory sensitivity issues. So like for me, I can't listen to audiobooks as it is. So being forced to listen to my own, I posted on Patreon of me just 5 minutes of me squealing or 3 minutes of me squealing. Just, it was like torture. It was torture. And then having to navigate, especially for Australians. So one thing that I recently discovered is that ACX, which is Audible's publishing service, so Amazon's publishing audiobook service, is not available for Australians. And so I had to go through a different company for that, which is Findaway Voices. And they have a process, and then I've just been so nervous about it that it's taken me like 2 months just to upload the completed audiobook, because it was so daunting, and it's still so daunting. So yeah, that for me was my biggest challenge. You'd think it'd be going to a signing, but no, I'd rather go to a signing than do another audiobook, and I've still got more to do. For me, in a signing in my bikini, and I think I'd have more fun.
Next time, I'm just going to put a boombox on my shoulder and we'll pass you with your audiobook playing in the most spiciest heated scene.
You will hear me squeal. I will stim so hard. I will just be like, I will know. Someone actually said that I should use like a snippet of the audiobook at my table at Babe, and I went, no, I would not be able to sit at my own table.
Just on repeat. So what has then been your greatest accomplishment so far?
Greatest accomplishment. Not feeling alone. I think, and not in the terms of personally, but in the terms of business. Like the friends that I have here is like, for instance, you and all the authors that I've connected with. I feel like for me, that's my greatest achievement. I am walking with people who are going down the same path, but their own version of it. And all our paths are intertwining, and we're all taking our own scenic sort of routes. And some of us are running, like we're all doing it differently, but I have never felt more interconnected with the world than I do now. And I have an amazing reader group, multiple groups actually. And I am very hands on with my readers on social media. So I try not to talk about anything political if I can. Sometimes I make mistakes and sometimes I am human and I'm allowed to be human. But I try not to talk about anything political and just have conversations with my readers. And I try to be active on every post that has positivity in it. I do avoid negativity. So anything that has anything with a but in it, I'm just like, no more reading. I can't now. But if I have that positive outreach with someone, I try to nurture it. So like in my Discord group, I'm regularly on the voice chat, and it makes people have said it makes me feel very human for them. Whereas a lot of other authors, they find it's quite daunting. And don't get me wrong, some of them are still quite nervous that they're going to say something wrong. And it's like, well, you're human, I'm human, and it's nice knowing that I can have that open hand connectivity with my readers, but then I also have it with authors who know what it's like when I want to talk about something political and something that's really bothering me and something that or I'm just excited for it, whatever the context is. But it's nice being able to talk to those people who can, in some ways, talk me down from the ledge of posting, because sometimes there are things that really grind on our nerves and things that we want to talk about, and sometimes it's just safer not to. When it comes to representation, that's a different story for me. I will always fight that political battle because that is something that I'm doing in all of my books. But when it comes to other stuff, sometimes it's better to just be quiet because that not being quiet can get you in a bunch of trouble. And that will affect your branding, that'll affect how readers view you. You have to really take things very slowly and very cautiously. So having those people that I can just be like, God damn it, not again, in there. And like I gift talk, so I'm just sending gifts of how annoyed I am. And like it's fantastic because I don't feel alone in that. And they understand and they can give me advice and I can give them advice. I have plenty of it now. So it's that not feeling alone within my career. I think that for me is the biggest accomplishment.
Oh, I love that. I love exactly as you say, we're all taking the scenic route, some are running, and particular friends come to mind immediately. So I love that. I have a segment called Speed Dating with an Author. So I've lit a candle, I've created ambience, we're going on a very romantic date. But basically, what it is 5 rapid questions. Are you ready?
Sure.
What is the clumsiest moment you've ever had?
My clumsiest moment. Uh, right as I was doing the arcs for A Soul to Heal, I was trying to close my bathroom window at my old house, and the bathtub sat here, and then the window was on the other side, so I had to lean over the bathtub. I got a notification on my phone. It spooked me. I fell into the bathtub. I ended up having to go get stitches on my hip because I just went ass over head into the bathtub. And like nothing was wet, nothing happened. All that happened was that my phone spooked me.
I feel like you're a clumsy person in general, to be honest.
I am. I am covered in scars.
What are the 3 words that best describe you?
A gremlin. Gremlin. I'm a gremlin. God. I'm a goth. I'm very much a goth with my shaved head.
That's so surprising.
Right. I'm not all pinks and butterflies and rainbows. Reserved. I can be quite reserved.
I'm surprised tequila didn't come up in those 3 descriptions.
Tequila. Tequila.
What is the song that best describes you? Or perhaps a band and ambience, a type of music.
Probably Sleep Token, to be quite frank with you. Yeah, I feel like a lot of their songs really vibe with how I think and how I view things, and the poeticness of their lyrics really matches me. So yeah, Sleep Token. That'll Bad Omens. Bad Omens.
We love. What, or should I say, who has been your favorite character to write and why? And you can only choose one.
That's not fair.
And
My favorite character to write. I think Merrick from book 4. Um, he's a grumpy, so grumpy, but he had more humanity than any of the other Dustwalkers, which I really like writing the other Dustwalkers because they're quite cute. But with Merrick, he was so grumpy, but there were times where he was really daft, just not human, understanding human etiquette. But he was also super sassy. And like he has a dad bod. He's shorter than the other Dustwalkers. Like I just loved writing him, and like he had those like intricate little like insecurities that you're just not expecting from a monster, but then like he just comes out with this super sassiness. Um, so like, and can I swear?
yeah, you have been throughout the whole interview.
But okay, so well, I don't actually realize when I'm swearing. It's like the equivalent of to me. But in one scene where he's talking about like where she'd probably like to ride his back, like to go through the forest, he's like, giddy up, more like giddy go fuck yourself. So he's fun, he was fun to write because of that sassiness. But then there was just those moments of innocence that just made him like, oh, you're cute.
I love that. What is a unique talent or skill set that you have that not a lot of people know about?
Unique talent or skill set.
It's a bloody good cocktail.
I can make a good cocktail. But I don't drink often, which is funny. I like my things to taste good. If I'm gonna put something in my mouth, it has to taste good. Unique set of skills. I am artistic all around, I guess. I used to be able to paint. I used to be able to draw. I used to be able to sculpt, stuff like that. So I'm just, oh God, I feel like that's a lame answer.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, the only reason why I stopped is because my handshake. But yeah, I used to draw a lot. I used to paint a lot, and then yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I have had so much fun today. So tell us what's coming out, and most importantly, where do we find you?
So what's coming out is the next book in the Dustwalker Brides will be coming out around February of next year. But I will also be releasing from an anthology which does fairy tales. So that's going to be a lot of fun. That's coming out in March. Where you can find me is across all of my social medias. You just look up Opal Reyne. So I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook reader group. I have a Discord server that is just full of my readers, and we are very open-hearted in there. I have my Instagram, I have Patreon, Twitter, and TikTok. So you can find me across almost every social media. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. And who knows, maybe we'll see what you get up to in the next year or so. Maybe get you back on.
Thank you so much for having me. I've had a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. All right. Bye, guys.